Jason's Log, Supplemental, 10:05 p.m. I know I'm supposed to be asleep, but I had to show you this. Dad's making Mom watch The Nightmare Before Christmas. She hates that movie.
But Elfman's score, the stop-motion animation, what is this? It's worth the price of admission. I mean, it's brilliant, and you're just wrong.
The story's super weak. It degenerates into a generic bad guy plot at the end.
But I don't understand. What part of it's brilliant and you're wrong are you confused by? Like, what you said was just patently false, and I'm correcting you.
I can't tell if you're joking right now or not.
Well, I mean, let me put it to you as nicely as possible. Something's not wrong with Jack. Something seems to be wrong with you. You just gotta admit when you're wrong.
Wow. What is this?
Well, a delightful, well-written, nigh-perfect movie.
I'm totally making you watch The Cutting Edge next time. And then I'm going to spend the entire time telling you why you're wrong for hating it. See how you like it, buddy.
No, you just reminded me. I really need to make a video on that movie so you can watch it and understand why, once again, you are incorrect. This movie is great, and that one is garbage, and the end.
Oh, the end? Is this movie over now?
Well, no. I mean, look, Jack Skellington isn't even Santa Claus yet.
I was being sarcastic. Let me know when my slightly more open-minded husband gets back from his vacation to Nutso Town.
What the heck?
Hour 5. Well, it is after midnight now, and I am already starting to feel the fatigue a little bit. It might seem kind of early in the 48 hours to start feeling so tired, but keep in mind that I had a full day before I started this whole thing, and that I have been cracking the whip on myself and doing nothing but this since this whole thing started, with no mental preparation or anything. So I'm going to try to make this as coherent as humanly possible, and hopefully I find a second wind at some point. But let's go ahead and get right into the last couple of issues of lead up to Knightfall. The end of this prelude, finally, we are reintroducing Jean-Paul Valley, who Robin is not familiar with yet, and we're going to get some recapping of sort of Azrael right at the beginning of this. So Batman 488, once again, written by Doug Mensch with art by Jim Aparo. I still continue to love these guys together. I don't think Aparo's work is quite up to spec from the last few issues in the issue right after this, but we'll get to that. I think it's maybe just my taste issue in the stuff that Aparo is best at drawing. I kind of want to see more stuff outside in the dark with the gothic stuff on the streets. Once he gets to brighter things and inside certain locales, I don't think he's as good. Although maybe these are running together for me a little bit. Maybe it's this issue, maybe it's the next issue. We'll get there. So Batman is going to be hunched over through most of these couple of issues, as he is just completely drained, ready to go lie down. Really needs to have done that days ago, and he's just down for the count. It is time for him to retire for at least a while. Remember the Joker at the end of 1989, it's time to retire. And so he's explaining to Robin that there's this new vigilante on the scene, Jean-Paul Valley, who was Azrael, and he explains all of the horrifying things about the Order of Saint Dumas and the system that has programmed Jean-Paul Valley's mind, much to his chagrin, and throughout his life, his childhood into adolescence, having no idea that he's basically a sleeper agent that was hypnotized and mentally programmed, conditioned by his father in order to be this angel of death. And then he proceeds to say, so Robin, would you train this guy for me to kind of, help us out a little bit while I'm kind of laid up? up. And Robin's like, oh, sure, Batman, no problem. Like, this is not the face that Robin has in this bottom right-hand corner that I would be making if I was just told that I was going to single-handedly have to train what at first you might assume is essentially going to be the next Robin or a second Robin or something out of essentially a like religious zealot mercenary, for lack of a better term. And so he is all in, and he's going to do this, and I guess he is just really impressionable and overly eager Robin, and he is just the ultimate idealist and optimist in this situation. Really love the attention to detail here. Of course, Aparo is just working on his right now on his own for these last few issues, so he's only really got to keep up with his own story, but and not have to piggyback so much off of a bunch of other writers as we're going to do when we get into Knightfall, when we jump back and forth between different creative teams, having to keep track of the whole continuity. But I still want to give him some praise for remembering things like only a couple of issues ago, Lucius Fox got tortured by Black Mask, and so he's still got the Band-Aids on his face. I really appreciate stuff like that. Once again, Batman is constantly hunched over, which is going to really pay off here in just a couple of minutes, where you'll see something you probably never expected to see Batman do, which is fall down a flight of stairs, or at least fall on a flight of stairs, and he's going to lie there for a while before Alfred finds him. He has pushed himself to the absolute max limit, and things are going to feel a little bit more realistic here in a bit, I think, because of the fact that he goes and sees Kinsolving, takes some time off, and then gets back into things, and is still going to be in such horrible shape. By the way, as we get further into Knightfall, I will remember less, or will know less of what is coming, but this is the part of Knightfall I am most familiar with. So we're going to get into an area where I don't know what's about to happen. I've got the broad strokes, but these issues, or at least the stuff at the beginning of Knightfall, I read when I was a kid, and I've looked at more than a couple of times. So anyway, then we get into Jean-Paul Valley joining Wayne Enterprises, becoming part of the security force, where he's basically just going to be a copy boy. He's told by his new boss, this is how you run the copy machine. Here are how many copies you're supposed to make sure you never do any more than that, etc., etc. He's going to put on this really goofy-looking green outfit. Love this page a lot. Really cool spread of panels. I love the choice of the slanted panels, which denotes how kind of unstable Batman is right now, and just how messed up the situation is for Batman. And once again, he basically, well, he doesn't say I'm fine this time, but he just says I've got to go rest, but don't worry about me, and he lumbers off. And one thing I'm appreciating about Jean-Paul Valley right now is that he still is that wet behind the ears kid who hasn't really found himself yet and is still trying to figure out where he starts and Azrael ends. He's very confused, and he's still a pacifist that is, I guess I should say, in a way, because of the programming with Azrael, it's like there is this this soldier, or again this kind of I don't know if mercenary is the right term, but this avenging angel, I guess, inside of the body of a pacifist, or you could say sometimes he is the mind of a pacifist inside the body of an avenging angel. It just depends on how you look at it and what he's wearing at the time. And I'm curious to see if it looks like a light switch change when Jean-Paul Valley suddenly has a very different physique and a different attitude, because right now he looks nothing like I know he's going to a little bit later. It's going to be very night and day. And So Dick Grayson, pardon me. I wish we were talking about Dick Grayson right now. It's kind of strange that we're not, because we need somebody to come in and fill in for Batman, or at least help out the team while Batman is out of commission. Put a pin in that, because that gets weird to me. But we've got Tim Drake revealing himself to Jean-Paul Valley and saying, hey, I'm going to be your guide this evening, and you need to put on this really generic ninja-looking suit that we're going to see here in just a moment, in order to go out and play crime fighter. And Jean-Paul Valley is cool with that. He's all in. And then we have what is probably my favorite page in this particular issue, where Bruce is attempting Zen meditation and failing at it, like he's failing at so much else right now, and once again being too hard on himself about it. So he is trying to center himself, represented by a black dot and a white void. Hang on to that black dot, don't allow it to transform into anything. Oh no, too late, it becomes a box, and then it becomes a bloody box, and then the white void becomes a bloody void. And that is a really good abstract encapsulation of Bruce's mindset right now and the way he's been living his life. His life is all blood, and there's nothing he can do to stop that. If he is going to continue to be himself, there is always going to be blood. There will be blood. And so then we get Azrael into this, or he's not Azrael at the moment, I guess. We get Jean-Paul Valley into this, like I said, kind of generic ninja costume. It looks sort of like a cross between Vigilante, that DC character, with a costume I've always really liked. This is sort of like that, but sans the visor thing. And then it also looks like, and this might be intentional, the ninja suit that Bruce Wayne sometimes wears when he's training with Lady Shiva and characters like that in, those years while he's training to be Batman. So I like that Jean-Paul Valley is kind of in that period right now. He's going to get this crash course where now it's real training. Now it's, you are the person you are now. We're going to shape you up and mold that person into something else, but like with your consent, while you're doing that on purpose, not the kind of Winter Soldier thing. Is Jean-Paul Valley's kind of proto-Batman period. This is a good place to talk about this, I think. So it's going to get weird into the next issue, because I think Aparo kind of jumps the gun a little bit here, kind of jumps the gun here, where he treats it like all along Jean-Paul Valley was coming in here to replace Batman. And then the next issue, Robin's going to talk about it like it's this idea that he just came up with. So at the end of there are a couple places here where he talks about it like, now, if you're going to, take over for Batman, you're going to have to stop killing people, buddy, and you're going to have to play by our rules, and you're going to have to be, just a little bit more altruistic. And from Jean-Paul Valley's perspective, it's like, I pretty much agree with you guys. It's just, I got this thing in my head that makes me do things I don't want to do. And you can't be sure that you can control him, and you can't be sure that he can control himself. And so this just, I guess, the point I'm trying to make is twofold. A, this seems like a really poor choice for a guy to be working with right now as Batman's out of commission. And it's the biggest issue I have with this, and where Azrael starts to feel too much like a plot device. Not quite to the Doomsday place, but a little too plot devicey, in that he's introduced with this, pretty interesting idea of conditioning and of the ways in which that he's like, but very much unlike Batman. A really cool idea of a character to introduce, but to do that intentionally, to be the guy who's going to take over for Batman later, it's difficult to believe that this is who they'd go to, especially if there are other characters that they could choose. Obviously, Tim Drake is, and he's proving here, that he is too green, and he's not prepared to be Batman, even if he had the physique for it, even if he was not a kid and big enough and tall enough. Nobody's going to believe him as Batman. And the point isn't just to have somebody, and we talk about this next issue, that can do what Batman does, but that can convince people that he is Batman. That's very important because we have something of a culture of dependency here. There's a big question raised of what does Gotham do without Batman? These Batman and Robin and even Gordon, I would say, he's not in these issues, but a lot of our kind of good guy characters would admit that the world has come to, for better or worse, revolve around Batman. And if Batman is gone, what do the crazies start to do with Gotham? Well, they'll take over because Bane recognizes in Vengeance of Bane when Bird describes what Gotham is like, that whether he realizes it or not, Batman rules Gotham. And so you need somebody that can essentially continue on the throne in Batman's stead without anybody realizing that he's done that. So the second issue is, as I alluded to a second ago, we kind of have the sense that that's what he's being groomed for, even though that's not explicitly really stated. It's almost like Robin's having a conversation, like jumping off of something that was never said, and the next issue, he's going to just suddenly get the idea for doing that. It's very odd. It reads like this is the lead up to this event, and we kind of know what's supposed to happen, so they're already talking about it almost like they read solicitations or something. Robin is trying to teach him how to deal with guns. You don't rush into gunfire, and you don't use guns, and you don't use, brutality. And more or less, he's going to do decently well in taking down these thugs, but there is going to be a moment where the system, the program in his head absolutely takes over, and that makes Robin a little bit nervous, but what is he's supposed to expect. He's not as he's a little too surprised by that, in my opinion. So there's this place where he just gets really impulsive and acts as Azrael would act, like Nomaz says again in sort of Azrael. He kind of rushes in just like he was told not to. Robin says and Batman says, I'm impetuous, pardon me. Again, it's starting to get to me a little bit too, but I don't have the luxury of going to bed or finding a Chandra Kinsolving, who we'll see here in the next issue. And so there's some action here, fight, and then we've got a conversation at the end of this where Robin is kind of evaluating the performance here from Jean-Paul Valley. He says, we'll work on it, maybe hypnosis, unlock everything in your mind, get a handle on all of it, and Jean-Paul says that would be good. This reads a little bit like a junior X-Man trying to teach a mutant how to control his powers in the stead of Professor Xavier. How well would that work out, depending on what that X-Man is? And you could arguably blame Batman a little bit, Bruce Wayne himself, for what happens later with Jean-Paul Valley, I would argue, because he put Robin in charge of this. Robin does his best, he's just not right to mentor this guy. And like Batman is really the only person that Jean-Paul Valley would be connected to right now that would understand anything about what he's going through. Not that Bruce Wayne himself has been conditioned in this way, but he's run into this kind of stuff before, and mental control is his thing. Like, he needs to be his Professor Xavier. Right at the end of this issue, Bruce is going to call Kinsolving and say, I'm going to need your help. And then we get into the next issue, which I think is superior to this one. It's at the bottom here, it says Killer Croc versus the Menace of Bane. So first we were introduced to Bane in Vengeance of Bane, and now we get something of a follow-up in one issue, The Menace of Bane. This will be the first time we've seen Bane since Vengeance of Bane. And some really interesting kind of contrast here with Killer Croc of all characters. What we're ultimately going to get here is, at the end of this issue, is kind of a showdown between fake Bane and fake Batman. and it's a really cool way to reintroduce Bane. I also like that, and again, I don't know that any of this is intentional, but I also like that we are reintroducing these characters backwards. So we get now Azrael first in following up and comparing him to Batman as he's working on becoming the replacement for Batman, and then we're getting Bane, who is kind of just toying with Batman right at the beginning of this as he's getting his feel for Gotham City, and again trying to understand this world that Batman lives in, that he has molded around him as he refuses to kill, which makes no sense to Bane. Right away on this first page, we are getting something of a callback to Vengeance of Bane. Mensch clearly understands and respects that material. I have no idea how much of a group effort it was in initially getting the plotting and the background for Bane, but Mensch, of course, didn't write that, but he might as well have. This is a perfect immediate follow-up that totally gets what was going on in that book. And so you get the image of the kind of bat demon that was haunting Bane's nightmares, and it doesn't look exactly the same, but it's the same idea. But this time it is haunting Killer Croc, and like I said, Killer Croc serves as kind of the wannabe Bane, the fake Bane, and there's a lot of really interesting paralleling and mirroring between these characters. So the idea is, of course I've not read the issues wherever this happened, but the last time Killer Croc dealt with Batman, he got trapped in the sewer, and he's basically been inside of a hell of his own making, and I sympathize with Killer Croc a little bit in this, because Killer Croc, buddy, I understand what that is like, although I would take this right now over what he goes through in the sewer any day, having to eat rats and keep his head above water, and really dealing with a lot of the same things that Bane did when he was in the prison. And of course, Bane has a great deal more control over that, more of a sense of what's actually happening to him. And I should say, I don't know if I would take Spawn Year again over this, but certainly what I'm going through right now, at least after 5 hours of it. So right at the beginning of this, Killer Croc does not understand time and place. He believes at first that he's in hell, and then when he's able to get out of the sewer, he's going to think that he's in heaven for a minute, and then for 3 months he's having to subsist on rats and things, and decides, no, wait, you know what? Maybe I never actually really did leave that hell. Once again, I can relate. Literally, Killer Croc believes that he is in hell, and of course, Bane goes through goes through a metaphorical hell, but he always has his wits about him, and Killer Croc does not have that. He is not in control like Bane is. We'll find out later that Killer Croc was attempting to do what Bane is doing, and trying to take down Batman and take the city away from him and become the big crime boss of Gotham. And here in a little bit, Bane's going to find out about that, and he wants to go after the guy who attempted that, to see what Batman is used to dealing with. And we'll talk about that when we get there. So Bruce calls up Kinsolving, and she asks him to meet her at the Botanical Gardens. He says that's kind of an unconventional place to meet, and she says, well, I am unusual, I am unconventional. And again, she's all about the holistic medicine, but she's going to realize that she's dealing with a very different personality than she's dealt with before, and her regular methods may not work, and she may actually weirdly have to resort to some more conventional methods in order to try to help him out with his problems. I like their relationship a lot. I think right away there's some chemistry there, and it is very clearly leading to an eventual romance, although it does a good job of making sure that neither of these characters realize that, and it's not making that happen too quickly. So, as you can see, we have a Killer Croc who is not the monster Croc, but the horrible skin condition Croc. And of course, just visually, I always prefer the more monster Croc. This is the only place I really remember seeing the skin condition version. And of course, this being a follow-up to a story that I didn't read, I'm sure he looks like this there. This is more realistic and believable, I guess, but it's not a series that really requires that kind of believability. It's getting away with a lot of kind of out there, over-the-top comic book stuff. And so I don't think it necessarily has to go that way. I think he could even look more monsterish and we could be just told that it's a skin condition. But some of this might just be what I'm used to with later books. It's just really weird to see a Croc that kind of looks like he's made on a TV budget, where you've got some prosthetics on a guy's head where he just sits in a chair for a couple of hours, as opposed to having to give him a full-blown kind of lizard head. And it's just weird in a comic book, because you can do whatever you want to do in a comic book. So Chandra is slowly unraveling the psychology of Batman, not realizing that she's dealing with Batman. And this is a really wonderful exchange where he's kind of breaking down for her the reason that he is constantly pushing himself, and more importantly, why he doesn't seem to be able to get any rest. And she says, you either are incapable or you're refusing to actually rest. And so I may have to resort to sedatives, even though I don't like prescribing medicine. And she asks, what do you think is the reason you can't let up? And he responds with, I guess I'm just driven. And she says, at this point, it may border on being obsessed. And Bruce doesn't come right out and agree with that, but he himself said that in his internal monologue a couple of issues ago. So again, Minch is being really consistent with what he's written already, and she's basically throwing his words right back at him without even realizing that she's doing that. He is really concerned that he's just going to burn out, and she has more faith in him than that, just the few minutes that she's met him, and says that this is a place where Bruce finally has somebody saying, you're actually being way too hard on yourself, and you're not giving yourself enough credit. She actually admires Bruce and says, I'm beginning to think I could learn a thing or two from you. She's picking up on the things that are really endearing and that make people want to look up to Batman, like people outside of the fiction that read this character. She says, given your condition, any normal person would have snapped by now. And again, he's constantly putting himself down. He says, maybe I have. And she says, if so, you've done it with aplomb and grace. I really like that line. Seeking treatment rather than taking an assault rifle into some shopping mall. I mean, that is such a good point, that Bruce Wayne could have easily turned into one of his villains, one of the kind of psychopaths that he's always trying to take down after his parents died, but especially after the dozens or hundreds of nut jobs he's taken down. Like, how does the guy like that continue to have any hope and faith at all in the future? And yes, he's after vengeance to some degree, and yes, he takes the law into his own hands, and he handles things in a darker way than somebody like Superman would, but there is an idealism to Batman, certainly, and she's picking up on that. And then, this is probably the best moment in this issue, after she says, rather than taking an assault rifle into some shopping mall, I just love that we go there. He responds with, I hate guns. And that's everything you need to know about Batman. What constantly keeps him from crossing that line is that he doesn't want to be the guy that did what happened to his parents. And that constantly gives him a sense of perspective. For better or worse, that's the line that he's not going to cross, and maybe helps him to retain his sanity. And so she apologizes and is like, oh man, I did not remember that your parents got murdered. And then says, you know, when we finally start meeting regularly, we should probably, you know, talk about that whole thing. And he's not totally sure that he can. Also, Vicky Vale is evoked here, which makes a lot of sense because, of course, we had her a few issues ago now, as we establish that she was the love of Bruce's life, that didn't work out, and of course, Kinsolving looks like she's going to be the new love interest that's going to take her place. So, of course, we've got to talk about her for just a second. She was the journalist who did the expose on the death of Bruce's parents. So everything, of course, goes back to that. She says, you've got to stop thinking of me as a traditional doctor who believes in some separation of the mind and body. I really like that. Again, we're dealing with this kind of psychosomatic issue, and this was something that we were starting to really make a big deal out of during this period in science and in criminal forensics and things like that, starting to have a little bit of a better understanding of how the brain works in conjunction to the body. Not to say that we didn't have that figured out before 92, 93, but it seemed like a thing that we were starting to talk about a whole lot more, especially in fiction. And I just like this relationship a great deal. I'm spending a lot of time on this, but it's wonderful. And she tells him to call her Chandra, which is very often the first sense that you get that somebody is romantically infatuated with the protagonist. And now Bane is going to talk to Bird about who Killer Croc is, and he's going to kind of very briefly explain this backstory that we pretty much already have, although we got it from a very surreal and unreliable narrator at the beginning, so it bears repeating, and it isn't given to us in too many pages. It doesn't feel like it doesn't feel redundant because it's kind of reinforcing something you couldn't totally be sure about. So I'm fine with that. And Bane basically says, he says it's time to prove my worthiness by taking him out. So he's going to, again, go after the guy who tried earlier to do what he's going to do now. And of course, that is not Batman's greatest adversary by any stretch, but Bane is piecing things together and doesn't have a great sense of the layout of everything yet. So I don't think he's saying, if I beat this guy, then it's time to take down Batman. Like, that's the only thing that will make him worthy. He does say it's time to prove my worthiness, but I interpret this more as his worthiness to go up against Batman, not to take over Gotham now, because he's going to find out very quickly that Killer Croc is really not much of a match, but it makes a lot of sense that he's doing that, I think. This is kind of curious. I didn't notice this in any issues before this, so I don't know if we just now started drawing this on or if I missed it. But we've got the armbands because Superman just died, and so Jean-Paul's wearing one, Robin's wearing one. I didn't notice anybody else with one, but it's a nice touch and a nice sense of continuity throughout the books. It's also a good idea to put that here because that's foreshadowing that something similar is about to happen to Batman. Killer Croc throughout this is hallucinating. He keeps seeing kind of mean jerk face kids calling him mean names like Crud Face. Crud Face really cracks me up. It seems like it's kind of a censorship thing where what Mensch really wants to write is S-head. I can't say the word either, but he can't say S-head. He has to say crud face, and you never actually have anybody that's calling him that. It's or maybe there's one panel at the beginning where somebody's actually doing that, but the rest of the time it's just in his imagination. He's got that thing where he's unhappy with where his reputation is. That's a theme that's been permeating throughout. and we're at Christmas time, or at least it's snowing outside, so it's during the winter, which is always an atmosphere that I like for Batman comics. It's kind of fun to see Bane in the snow, very much out of his element. He was in South America before, so a place where he probably wouldn't have seen a lot of snow. And then we're gonna go into this mall, and yeah, this is one of the crud face moments. It's really funny where he sees some mannequins being bullies to him because he thinks that they're real, and then he goes and rips their heads off. We get into some weird coloration in this issue. Here in a second, we're going to have a panel where somebody just, where I say somebody, where I guess Aparo just, like, forgot to... Actually, I don't think you can blame Aparo. I think you have to blame the colorist for both of these things. But we'll see in a minute. He's going to have a bare leg. But... half of his body, or at least his torso, turns into like NES Batman, where he's got like the purple, and it's actually a really cool looking look, but it doesn't look intentional to me. Like, maybe it's supposed to just be the lighting, but it's weird that it doesn't hit the faces weird at all. It's just a purple-colored torso, and then in the panel to the bottom left, you've got it there too, so it's really strange. This whole thing is going to wind up in a toy store, which is a location that I really like thematically, because Killer Croc is... because Bane is literally toying with this fake Batman right now, and also kind of with Killer Croc. I think he expects Killer Croc to be a little bit more of a match. I also just love the entrance he makes here, where the first time Jean-Paul Valley sees him is on a whole bunch of TVs. He already seems like this larger-than-life persona to him, and then he's going to have to deal with Killer Croc for a second, and he's going to be more of a match for Batman, or for this, non-Batman, than he's going to be for Bane. They kind of, flop around each other for a minute until Bane walks in, and Bane is not above one-liners. We're going to find out here in a second. Killer Croc says, "Who are you?" And he says, "Tonight? Tonight I'm your Bane. Tonight I'm your Bane." And I'm like, well, you were already calling yourself that, though. Like, I guess he means tonight it's all in the delivery, right? Tonight I'm your Bane. Usually I'm just Bane, but this time I'm your Bane. And then we get into Bane's head for a minute, and it's a little bit of... I'm getting a little bit of whiplash with the POV switches. It's kind of weird that just for a second we go back to Bane. A part of me kind of wishes that it was... Well, I could be wrong. Let me look here for a second. Maybe this is what we're doing, because I was going to say, I think it'd be nice if internal monologue-wise we only went into Croc and Bane, because they're kind of the mirrored characters this time, where, again, Croc is the kind of pathetic weakling version of Bane, and Bane is what he wishes he could be. He's not like other people, no fear in him. He's talking about Croc, more like the bat demon of his nightmares. I really like that we evoke that, because again, that's what the image at the beginning is evoking. The bat demon of his nightmares, only but stronger, much stronger. And I don't know, it's weird that he says that because he beats him so easily. He's like, there's no fear in him. So he's not really worried about me, except I'm wiping the floor with him here. He breaks his arm, which is, I guess you could say, some foreshadowing. Bane is just real tough when he pumps himself up, and he breaks bones. He breaks you, and then he breaks you, and then he breaks you, and that's what Bane does. And then Bane is also not above puns. He throws Killer Croc into a bunch of plush animals, and he says, "Stuff you. Stuff you." I just can't help it. This is not a Tom Hardy Bane, but whenever he's doing one-liners, I absolutely cannot help myself. I gotta enjoy this a little bit, or I'm gonna go as insane as Killer Croc did at the beginning of this. I'm gonna start hallucinating mannequins that I gotta pop the heads off of. And then Rob goes, "Uh-oh." He goes, "I'm Bane, but you are not the Batman." And then you get one panel of Bruce right at the end that just says, "Please help me," and I love that panel, that he is so down for the count and so totally helpless right now when he's, obviously really needed. He's got a couple of, I don't want to say a couple of yahoos. He's got Robin, who knows what he's doing, but again, he's still very green and relatively, and Jean-Paul Valley, who really doesn't know what he's doing, and also could be a massive liability because he flipped the wrong switch in his head, and he's murdering everybody, which is kind of the opposite of what they want. And it's wonderfully tragic. So that is the lead up to Knightfall, and now we're going to get into Knightfall proper, getting into the next hour, which I'm excited about, but also it feels daunting because I have so many hours of this left, and I'm already exhausted. Although, I was hoping for that second win, and I feel like I'm starting to find it a little bit. As I'm talking, I'm getting some of my energy back, and so, I don't know, maybe there's going to be some running around while reading just to kind of keep my energy flow up. So I think I'm gonna go read right now, and I'll see you again in another few minutes.